Well, hi, my name is Andy Tidy and welcome back to Canal Hunter, the channel which is seeking out the lost canals of the UK's Industrial Revolution. In this series, we've been following the remains of the Shropshire Tugboat Canal network, which was centred on what we now know today as Telford. So far we've journeyed in from the remains of Norbury Junction of the Shropshire Union Canal to the outskirts of the town of Telford, before being rather sidetracked for a couple of weeks by the Donnington Wood Canal, which connected the collieries, ironworks and limestone quarries owned by the Duke of Sutherland and the Lilleshall Company. Well, we're now back on track to trace this old canal to its conclusions on the bank of the River Severn at Ironbridge. We begin this trail here in Donnington Wood, or to be more precise, at Oakengates Wood, the point where the Wonbridge/Shrewsbury Canal met with the Donnington Wood Canal. The project to connect these existing canals came from a chap called William Reynolds, the local ironmaster who had a big works at Ketley. He inspired others to build a canal at Coalbrookdale and Ironbridge, all done by public subscription. This was a project which was far too large for one man. But to do so, they had to cross a big hill, and it had no water supply for a traditional flight of locks. Well, it just so happened that Reynolds had been successful in building an inclined plane near his works, so they just employed the same model here on a bit of a larger scale. One of the big problems of canal hunting in this region is the fact that although the tugboat canal network was really successful for half a century or more, its small size meant it was easily replaced by tramways and railways as that strand of transport evolved. In fact, much of the route to the south was converted into railways in the 1850s, obliterating most of the canal bed in the process. So the canals we're looking for here were dewatered about 170 years ago. And rather frustratingly, they predate the age of photography. So for the next sections, we're going to have to seek out the remnants on land rather than stitching together a sequence of old images as I've often done elsewhere. So I have returned to near Smith's Crescent, the junction of the Shrewsbury Canal, the Donnington Wood Canal and the Shropshire Canal. And immediately we are faced with the hill at Oakengates Wood and the site of the Oakengates Inclined Plane. And surprisingly, here beside Oakengates Wood Way, we were able to pick up the Canal Trail immediately. The ditch is still very visible in the landscape. The canal bed ran along up here. You can see the ditch. It was like a big pool, then disappears under the modern road layout. Bit of a dip here under the modern Oakengates Wood Way. And hopefully we can pick up the incline as it goes up the hill. Well, this looks pretty hopeful to me. We are exactly on the right line. Let's see where this footpath takes us. Often the old remnants are simply replaced by modern rights of way. Well, my legs tell me we're on the right track. We're looking for a rise of 120 feet over 320 yards, and it'll be a straight line. I think pretty safe bet that what we're looking at here in the trees is the base of the old incline. There's even a sign at the bottom which suggests that we are definitely on the right track. Well, after being abandoned for 160 years, I suppose it's a bit much to expect much in the way of built remains. But after climbing up that 120 feet, which actually seems quite a lot when you're doing it on the ground, it didn't seem nearly as far on paper, I have found some bits of masonry fragments at the top. Well, having crested at the top of the incline, we're now looking for a saucer-shaped depression in the ground which leads onwards for the top pound. I think it's pretty certain that this is it. It's pretty well filled up these days, but it's very definitely a saucer-like depression in the ground. Well, the winter storms here in the UK have been pretty savage in January and February. There just has been almost no let-up in the weather, hence the delay in making these videos. But at last we have a window of a few days good weather, and immediately I see that the undergrowth is starting to come up. the leaves are starting to bud on the trees. So it's a good job that I'm doing this section in Donnington Wood now and not in a month's time, or there'll be even less to see. I know by looking at the old maps that basically the canal route skirted the edge of the modern day woods at the boundary between the woods and the adjoining houses. So I'm just going to stick close to the edge of the woods and walk along here and see if I can actually see any built remains. So far around here, no joy. Well, I know from the old maps that the line of the canal ran just at the edge of the hillside, and modern day housing is immediately to the right. And we appear to have about a 45-foot wide ditch, and it's as clayey as anything underfoot, very, very slippery. I also know that along the line of the canal a couple of houses have been built. That's fairly unusual for canals, but we are approaching a group of houses, so I guess we're on the right line. Taking this deviation around through the woods takes us to a place called Cockshut Piece, an area of woodland that's riddled with old coal shafts. And it was here, somewhere under my feet, that there was an underground canal known as the Navigable Levels. There was a special bell-shaped shaft that was dug down. The boats were lowered down end on and then floated in this underground network of canals which connected several of the local pits. The loaded boats, which must have been pretty small, were then floated out somewhere across that way to the east. All remnants of both the mines and the navigable levels underground have obviously long been buried. I'm sometimes a little nervous about wandering around in the open woods because you still find this sort of thing lurking around the top of an old mine shaft. Who knows just how stable the bottom of that is. Best stick to canal hunting. I love local interpretation boards. They can really get you back on track. You see, we started off here up at the inclined plane, and then the canal line is this straight line that keeps coming down the page. We've kind of tracked it using the path in the woods, but it's intermittently gone in and out of the housing estates. And what we're looking for now is the path that comes out of the woods and back out onto the Queensway. And to avoid getting ourselves off track, I think we're going to go out of the woods and round the back of the houses. In the main, the line of canal through here seems to have been turned into public rights of way. I mean, it was last used in the 1850s, so there's not likely to be many fragments of actual canal and bridges and stuff like that. It was canal, then it was railway, now it's footpath or cycleway. This actually forms the start of the Silken Way, and if you want to come exploring this way, with the exception of the bit just back there, this is a pretty good one to use a bicycle for. You're covering some fairly long distances, and of course the paved cycleways make excellent tracks. And whilst I say that the canal bed is pretty difficult to find, if you look closely into the area beside the path, you can see that there is a ditch and a stream in the bottom. It's just that the right hand section of the canal has been filled in, used as a footpath. The maps of the canal in this area are very indistinct, but I suspect that the flat opening we're looking at here used to be an open area of water where the boats were marshalled up and loaded up with coal. For now, we carry on following the footpath which mirrors the old canal track out of the woods. The best you can do around here really is just to try and follow the contours. The canal may be long gone, but if you know its path and you know you need to stay flat, travelling from one point to another on the level is your best bet. And sticking to that contour takes you through some of the less salubrious parts of Telford. But I know we're on the right contour and we're heading for the Sneds Hill Tunnel. As far as I can tell, the canal crosses across the land around about here and continues into the trees, where it had to burrow its way under the hill through a tunnel. Oakengates represents something of a crossroads for this waterway, because you've got the old canal, then you've got the railway overlaid onto that, and then you've got the modern roads going over that again. So 160 years of transport progress, eradicating the faint lines of a very small tugboat canal. And if I'm absolutely honest, things go from bad to worse, because the modern town of Telford has been built completely over this line, and for probably a mile and a half it just simply ceases to exist. The levels aren't there, contours aren't there, not a single trace. Telford New Town truly is a new town built on a brownfield site. Even the old maps from 1900 offer us very little help about this massively redeveloped area. Canal runs underneath rail, which became road. Only the topography remains the same, and the rise in the ground near the old Greyhound Inn tells us that we are more or less on the top of the old Sneds Hill Tunnel, the junction with the Ketley Branch Canal. Sneds Hill Tunnel was actually the end for this canal. It partially collapsed, and there wasn't enough money or inclination to reinstate it. Instead, the canal track was sold to the railway company, and the rest, as they say, is history. As we get into Oakengates, the redevelopment just closes in on us. You can't really see anything. You'll even lose the line of the canal. So what I think I'll do at this point is I will throw the drone up and have a little look at the area from above. See if we can see the line of the canal coming in from Donnington Wood and Cockshut Piece. Then heading out to the site of the old Sneds Hill Tunnel. Hopefully we can see the mouth of the railway tunnel, which was close by and kind of acts as a proxy or a mirror for it. And then leading out to the west, we can see the line of the old Ketley Canal running just to the right of the Holyhead Road. Now, I keep on mentioning William Reynolds. He's a very influential character around here. And this was the terminus for his 1.7-mile private canal, connecting his works at Ketley through to the minerals here at Oakengates. The old 1900s maps show here and there some fragments of dried up canal bed, already abandoned for over half a century. But at least they're enough to point us in the right direction. In terms of chronology, this canal was built just after Reynolds completed his one at Wambridge. His old canal stretched out alongside the Holyhead Road and has been really heavily built over, including the stop lock at the junction with the Shropshire Canal. Even Holy Trinity Church stands on its path, but at least it's a landmark along the way to the west. The boundary between the Wellington Amateurs Football Club and its industrial neighbour to the rear are plausibly on the line of the canal, or possibly the mineral line which superseded it, passing over the Beverley roundabout, and then under the Holyhead Road and into the car park in front of today's Farm Foods shop. But enough of all this "there used to be a canal here" nonsense. What we need, I guess, is some built remains. So let's go and find some. Well, I know how you like to have a real bit of canal, so I thought I'd finish this episode with this bit right behind me. This is the far end of the Ketley Canal. It is about 1.5 miles down the line from Oakengates. It was a small privately owned canal. All its line has been lost until you reach the site of Farm Foods. In fact, I parked in the car park in front, and that is the line of the old canal. And from there it snakes around into Potter's Bank Tunnel. If I turn the camera around, you'll see the western portal has all collapsed, but the eastern portal still remains. And because the trees are open there, I've been able to get a nice bit of drone footage. This little canal was abandoned in stages. First of all, the very western end was abandoned. That's the bit that went into Reynolds Ironworks. Then, till about 1820, the canal continued to here. This was an old coal wharf. And then in 1897, the western end of the Potter's Bank Tunnel collapsed, then rendering nearly all of the canal unusable. Now, the canal went on from here to the site of the UK's very first inclined plane. And if we want to get round to that section, we're going to have to follow the boggy trench south under Redleys and then curve around the back of Ketley Old Hall. So we're going to go and have a look at that now, see what we can find. Well, having left the old coal wharfs behind, I need to try and get round the back of Ketley Hall. Come down Redleys and, well, this little track looks like a likely option. I'll have a little poke around up here and see if I can find anything. And bingo, we have success. Here behind the old hall, there is the trough of the old Ketley branch canal, threading its way through the trees. The hall, for reference, is just up there. It's always good to finish off a Canal Hunter episode somewhere seriously obscure, and you won't really get much more obscure than this, in the back of an abandoned wood somewhere in Telford. This is the site of the old Ketley inclined plane. It's to the south side of Ketley Hall and it falls to the west. So a little bit of history about what is quite a momentous location on the inland waterways of the UK. This was the site of the very first inclined plane, which was built by William Reynolds in 1788. He needed to get his raw materials in Oakengates, which was about a mile that way, and connect it down to his ironworks, which was about 1/2 mile that way. The trouble was we had Ketley Bank in between. It meant that the canal needed to rise up about 73 feet. His problem was that there was no real water supply up here, so locks were out of the question. They were also very slow. So he invented and created the UK's first operational inclined plane. It wasn't enormous, but it was notable because it was successful for as long as he needed it to work. He built it able to carry tugboats weighing up to 5 tons, and he put larger wheels at the downhill end of the cradle, a bit like a railway carriage, and smaller ones at the top, and that kept the tugboat more or less level as it went up and down. He built the incline with twin tracks so that one tugboat loaded with heavy goods could go down and it would pull the empty one up the other side. Later on, he added a steam engine. For such a landmark structure, it's a real shame that there are no surviving photographs, but that's impossible because it was both built and abandoned before the advent of modern photography. What we do have is a single token that was struck in commemoration for its opening, and from that token we can get an idea of its shape and its form and its size. We also have some surviving records produced by engineers who came to see this modern marvel in the Telford area. Uniquely for the inclined planes of this area, it had kind of a lock arrangement at the top. It contained a triangle of water. The tugboat was floated in onto the cradle, and then the water was pumped back out of the area around it and back into the top canal. This wasn't something that was ever repeated. In future, they just used a hump of ground. They called it a berm, and they pulled the tugboats and the cradles over the top. Where exactly the canal went after this through to Reynolds' work is anybody's guess. A canalish kind of track continues, but to be perfectly honest, this could just as easily be a mineral way. And it leads to a point beyond the Iron Bridge Way, which is described as a water level on the 1900 map. So I suppose that may have been its terminus, but frankly, who knows? In terms of trying to put a date on how long this inclined plane worked for, you can go back to the original Ketley tithe maps of 1840, and at that point, even then, there were bits of the canal marked as missing. There was certainly no mention of the inclined plane, although there was a report from a visiting engineer who came around this way in 1818, and he found the plane disused. So that suggests it had an operational life of 30 years, or maybe considerably less. Either way, the plane and this side haven't seen a boat for 200 years. So who knows the truth of the end of the Ketley Branch Canal? It's been worked over by coal mining and then brick and tile works. And then since World War II, there's been a big industrial estate built right on top of the end. So I suppose it's no great surprise that a little ditch from the late 1700s has totally vanished. Anyhow, that is truly the end of this episode of Canal Hunter. Hope you've enjoyed it, a bit different, and I will see you again very soon. Cheerio.